Welcome to the Meditation Podcast. You can find all our episodes on meditationpodcast.org. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. You find the links in the podcast description. I'm also a podcasting coach because I've got 4 other podcasts: Learn Polish podcast, the Crypto podcast, Speaking podcast, and the Awakening podcast, where I'm exposing fraud and corruption, but with solutions. And you'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. My guest today is near the DC area in the USA, registered yoga teacher, certified personal trainer, group fitness instructor, nutrition coach, but more importantly, and what we'll be talking a lot about, Chakra Coach. Please welcome Sarah Bright.
Hello, Roy. Thanks so much for having me.
And I actually forgot about podcaster, which is an important thing.
That's true. That's one of my main things, podcasting.
Yeah, and it's, I think once you start, you just get the bug for it and you start loving it.
Yeah, couldn't help myself. Couldn't stop now if I tried.
And I believe you, we'll go in a bit later, discussing you, but since we mentioned the podcast, I think you actually started on the end of the 31st of December. It's from what I remember, 31st of December 2019 is when your first episode went up, which is a strange time to start, but also a good way of kind of starting the new year.
Well, that was exactly my thought. I dropped my very first episode on the last day of the year. So my podcast is currently called Your Chakra Coach. But when I started the podcast, it was called Chakra Balancing for Weight Loss. And so I was getting started with brand new episodes first of the year. You know, that's a great time for setting new intentions for the year and getting ready for any sort of fitness and health goals. And I was really involved in the fitness and wellness space at that time. And so it made a lot of sense to kind of start right there at the first of the year. So that's kind of why. But then, of course, as you may recall, some things happened in 2020 that shifted everybody's focus. It changed our lives some. And so at the end of 2020, I rebranded to Your Chakra Coach. It was just a better representation of the broader variety of things that we started talking about. We got more into emotional health and spiritual wellness and mental health, and pulled away a little bit from the focus on the physical body.
And I know just from America, from different books that I read and everything, they kind of go after people that are promoting weight loss, even though you're doing it naturally and everything. They're more trying to push the chemical aspect of things.
Right. Yeah, weight loss is tricky, right? My premise with weight loss, in the entire chakra balancing for weight loss premise, is that you actually don't need to lose weight, which is kind of strange. But the idea is that we're trying to separate ourselves from the cultural and arbitrary societal standards for our bodies and get the feelings that we're looking for. Women especially think they're going to be happier and feel better about themselves and more confident if they lose weight. And my experience after 20 years of being a personal trainer was that wasn't working as well as people thought it would. And so I said, well, what if we flip it? What if we work on our insides and don't worry too much about our outsides? And then if the weight loss comes because we're now making loving, healthy choices for our bodies, then great. And if it doesn't, that's also great, right? Primarily, the focus is your body is perfect. It's a perfect vessel for your perfect soul. And let's stop trying to change our external packaging to meet somebody else's demands. So that was my that was sort of the basis of it all. I'm working on a book right now that will be coming out hopefully in the next year or so. And that's the basis. We're going back to my chakra balancing for weight loss roots. And that will be, again, the thesis of the book. You don't need to lose weight.
Brilliant.
You are perfect.
I love that. I think that was fantastic.
Let's work on emotional and spiritual wellness, which are actually the things that are going to make you feel good and have the life that you want, not the physical changes. So that might have been a little bit of a digression, but there you go.
Brilliant.
That's where I live.
Yeah, brilliant. So, you can just kind of introduce yourself a little bit further, but also tell us your kind of whole journey, between yoga, meditation, and everything, how it led on to the chakras.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a fairly conservative Christian household, and you may be aware of that movement in the United States. And I wasn't quite as deep into it as it is existing now, but certainly chakra work and yoga and meditation was not included in that particular type of upbringing. But I learned about the chakras when I went to a theater conference when I was 19. I was in college studying acting and singing and dancing, and we went to a theater conference, and there was a workshop on using the chakra system for character development, which again is a very interesting way to use this ancient system. But since I'd never heard of it, it didn't occur to me that that wasn't what it was for. But when I went into that workshop and she started explaining what it was, I really felt very connected, almost like it was resonating with me on a primal level. I felt that I was hearing something very, very true in a way that I had not felt going to more traditional Western churches. That isn't to say they aren't useful for a lot of people. That just wasn't useful for me, at least at that time in my life. So apart from the character development, I became a student of the chakras, and I'm probably aging myself a little, but this was sort of pre-Google, pre-internet. So I so I went to a bookstore. You're familiar with bookstores. And and I had to go find books and read books, and I just found every scrap of information that I could. I would find local workshops. I would go to anything I could find that would help me with this spiritual development as I was determining who I was going to be as a spiritual being. I had some fairly severe, moderate anxiety as a kid. And I always say my dad accidentally taught me to meditate because I couldn't sleep. So he taught me this progressive relaxation exercise that I did every night to fall asleep. And I think he would be mortified if he knew that he was the one that set me on this path of meditation. But I'm so, so grateful now. And I'm teasing. He would not be mortified. Dad, if you're listening, sorry. But anyway, so I became a student of the chakras for, I mean, I still am, right? It's been 20 years. I'm still studying. I'm still learning. I do feel like there's no such thing as an expert in that way, in that you're constantly learning about yourself. And also there are new ancient texts being discovered in India every year. So there's new information coming to us all the time. And so it's a joy and a delight because we get to keep studying and learning new things about the chakras, about the yoga system, about ourselves. On a parallel and what I considered completely unrelated path, I was studying to be a personal trainer and a nutrition coach and a group fitness instructor. And so I was doing all of these physical body activities, but I personally was keeping them very separate from my mind and my spiritual development. I very much in a Western way failed to see the connection between the two. And so, but that is really where I started learning that what we were doing in the gym wasn't creating sort of the emotional response that people were looking for. I was finding that people would lose weight, they would build their muscle, they would get their perfect body or whatever, and they still weren't happy because that wasn't the problem. The problem wasn't their body. The problem was the inside, and they were feeling like they weren't existing in the world in an authentic way. And so we were looking for all of these external solutions. And at a certain point, I guess about 15 years in, I thought, oh my gosh, what if I combine these two things? As if I was the first person to ever have the idea that mind and body could be connected. I was like, I'm so clever. But I started sort of using what I knew and what I'd been using personally to work with my clients on these sort of spiritual holes that they might have been experiencing. Now, again, nobody was paying me for chakra coaching at the time, right? So I was sliding it into our sessions. I'd be like, okay, well, while you rest, let's talk about your childhood or whatever, it was. But really trying to discover the emotional component to wellness that was missing in the physical environment. And after after several years of doing that, I started formally combining it. And that's when I birthed the podcast. And as you know, you start that podcasting thing and it's a something you can't stop. You just want to keep going. And so, again, even with the rebranding, now I've branched out. We're discussing almost exclusively psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual wellness, but physical wellness is a part of the chakra system as well, right? There's a physical component to yoga. That's what we think of as yoga classes, asana, posture practice. So, it isn't as if you've abandoned the physical. We still have to live on the planet. We still have to engage with the world with these bodies. And so my goal is to help people sort of integrate all of the parts of themselves and start to really feel whole and healthy and happy where they're living right now.
Excellent. So for those that don't know nothing about chakras, you might explain it and then go through the different ones.
Yeah, sure. So the chakra system is sort of a map. It's an energetic map that's overlaid over your body. There are multiple systems, multiple schools of thoughts on how many there are. There are some with as few as 5 or 3 even. The one that I think is the most popular, particularly in the West right now, is the 7 chakra system that I use, but there are 12 chakra systems, 15, 180. So there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And the word chakra is a Sanskrit word that translates to wheel or disc. And so we think of them as small energy centers. I like to imagine them. I give the visual of the place where the veil between your physical body and your astral body, your emotional body, your mental body is the thinnest. It's the place where the crossover is the easiest to sort of tap into. Each of the chakras, the 7 ones that I use primarily, sits at a very specific place in your body. It's a little different on everybody because our bodies are not all the same. And there's physical structures there, organs, there are nerve ganglias, there's nerve complexes that sit there. And so that's how the energy body affects the physical body. And people say, oh, you can't really see a chakra. Well, you couldn't take an x-ray of them. That's true. They wouldn't show up on an MRI. But I always remind people we can't see a lot of things that do exist. You can't see a thought, but it exists. You can't see an emotion, but it exists. You can't see the wind, but we can see the effects. The chakras are like that, right? They're a philosophy as much as anything else. And so I use the 7 primary ones that go from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. And each one has different physical structures in your body that it is responsible for or governs. It contains various, in the Western interpretation, it contains various psychological traits, characteristics, and each one contains a fundamental human right. And I do a lot of focus on that because I find that we tend to lose our fundamental rights as humans in our efforts to engage with society, meaning that we're losing our authenticity. And I think, like in meditation, one of the reasons we do it is to tap back into our true selves, right? Clear the clutter and find the real you that was you, that will always be you, before all those things got put on top of you, before all those expectations from the moment of your birth. There have been worldly expectations, and part of our job as humans is to peel some of that away and find our real selves. And so that's a lot of the work I do with the chakra system.
And because I've heard of being 7, and I've heard that there's 12 and more, and with the colors then, because you see the graphics that are used, is that kind of the same with all of them, or does it depend on who the teachings come from?
It very much depends on where the teachings come from. The colors were only really associated with the chakras in about the 1960s or 70s. That's a relatively new addition to the chakra systems. It's very helpful, and it's a good organizational system. But when you get beyond maybe 7 to 10, say the color, like your hand chakras don't necessarily have a color associated with them, at least not in a lot of our schools of thoughts. So I think the colors are very helpful because a lot of us are such visual people, especially if you're doing any sort of chakra meditation. If you're doing a root chakra meditation, it can be very helpful to picture a red spinning wheel of light or a red lotus, right? It gives us something more tangible to focus on. And so I think that's a really good use of the color system as when it attaches to the chakras.
And like, because there's the throat one as well. Is that connected with voice? And yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So if it's helpful, we can kind of start at the root and go up and talk about what each.
Yeah. Because I mean, some
Okay.
people, they've heard of chakras, but they don't really know. And it's good to, I mean, obviously you've got fantastic experience, so it'd be nice to go through the whole lot of
Yeah, happy to. So we'll start at the base of the spine, which is where most people start with their work, and that's the root chakra, and it is associated with the color red. It's relatively easy to remember. You can think of it as a rainbow kind of going up to the top. So the root chakra is associated with the color red, and it is primarily responsible for the material world, your legs, your hips, but also just heavy, dense earth energy. It is our chakra of stability, of grounding, and our fundamental right to be, to exist, to take up space on the planet, to be here as your authentic self in the world. And it's interesting because the chakras are also very roughly related to developmental ages. And that chakra is related to sort of pre-birth to about 7. Sometimes it's earlier than that, but think of it as early childhood. And it's interesting because newborns are not people pleasers. Newborns will demand to have their needs met. They fully expect that that their right to exist and to ask for what they need is top of everybody's concerns, right? And I think we really, we lose a lot of that as we have to, start encountering other people and taking other people into consideration. But what happens is we lose our right or our understanding of our right to be authentically ourselves, to take up space. I mean, that's part of what weight loss is. A lot of people want to lose weight in a subconscious effort to simply be smaller, to take up less space. I don't have the right to take up so much space. I don't have the right to exist so big in the world. And if I'm physically smaller, then I'm not using up so much, right? So that's the root chakra. It also
and just when we're on that, because you mentioned the grounding, does the grounding then stimulate that, like walking barefoot and just being on, walking on a beach and stuff like that?
Exactly. That is one of the sort of healing or balancing activities that you can do. Get out into nature, reconnecting with nature. A tree never wonders if it should be growing where it is. A tree never wonders, should I have another branch, right? Trees grow, plants grow. So being out in nature is a really wonderful way to ground and find stability and security. A lot of people have very unstable, insecure childhoods. There, neglect or abuse, or even just parents who are distracted, caregivers who aren't able to provide the kind of attention that a child craves, can result in us having some root chakra issues. And so working through those with various grounding and stability exercises can help us heal in that way. Yeah, that's a great question. Then if we move up to the sacral chakra, which is about several inches below your belly button, kind of right where our reproductive organs are. And that is the color orange. And it is responsible for your reproductive organs, for creativity, for emotions and feelings. That's really the seat of our relationships to others. And it makes sense because as we're growing, as we learn that we need to connect with other people, we start to have feelings and emotions and relationships with the first people in our lives. But that could be a mother, a father, a caregiver, teachers, could be anybody that provides some of those first relationship experiences. And the right there is to feel. You have the right to experience all of the emotions that exist for humans. None of them are wrong. We tend to sort of give emotions, good, bad, yes, no, right, wrong. And society encourages that. Like some emotions are for some people, some emotions are not, right? Like little boys, oh, if they get angry, that's okay. Little girls, if they get angry, not so good. And I realize that's a very broad generalization, and that's not true everywhere and for every person, certainly, but it can really help us develop into people that push part of our emotions away, that compartmentalize parts of our feelings. Or people are told, oh, you're too much, you're too sensitive, right? You feel too much, and you're encouraged to quit feeling. Well, the problem is you don't quit feeling. You just have to sort of, compact it down and put it on a shelf. And that is where we process our emotions as well. The element there is water, and water is a cleansing agent, right? But we don't let our emotions process through our bodies. We put them away. We don't deal with them. And then they come out in other ways, like a trapped emotion can come out as pain someplace else, right? We say if you don't process your emotions, they'll come back and demand your attention some way, somehow. You're going to have to deal with them. But we don't. And that is because our sacral chakras get imbalanced and get blocked, which is a tricky word, but I think that's a common word that people use to think about the chakra system. And I get it. Like that means that the energy isn't flowing properly through the energy center from one chakra to the next.
And do you do like breath work then? Because I've seen a lot of people release emotion. So if that's kind of in that area, does the breath work then kind of help release traumas or understand them and kind of then allow you to move on?
Absolutely. Breath work is beautiful for that. And it is partly because the breath, when you breathe in, is, you do have that breath in that low belly area where this emotion is. And also breath can carry a lot of tension and stress out of the body with it. So yeah, breath work is terrific for the sacral chakra. Also movement. And I don't mean exercise. I really mean movement. A lot of emotions get trapped in our hip areas, which is why in yoga classes, hip openers are so popular. People like, oh, my hips are so tight. Oh, my hamstrings are so tight. I'm like, oh, yes, what you have are some emotions that need working through. And if you've ever been to a yoga class and started crying for some reason, it's largely because you're releasing a lot of that stagnant energy, and it's coming out in the form of water and tears. Very, very common. And if you haven't done it, I promise, but you've been to yoga class, there was somebody in class crying. There's almost always somebody in class having that emotional release. That's part of what it's for. And so,
like with yoga, and because how I kind of relate this is I joined the gym last year, and I started doing, doing the gym 2 days a week, and then there's like a back class. So I said I start doing it, but they're making you lift your hands and everything, and it's like we don't do that in life anymore. When you're a kid, you're always, whether you're playing tennis, whatever you're playing, but we tend to, so we're not really using movement properly. So that's why I'd encourage everybody to either do yoga or do something that activates all your body.
absolutely. Moving your body is imperative for your mental and emotional and spiritual health. And that can literally be in any way. If you don't want to work out, fine, you can take a walk. If you don't want to take a walk, you can dance. If you can't stand up, if you have knee or hip or ankle issues or whatever it takes, you can reach with your arms, you can flow, put on some music that makes you feel like moving a little bit. And that will also help release those emotions. But yes, our current sort of situation of like the work that we do and things like that doesn't allow us to do things like reach overhead or explore all of the movements in our hips and our shoulders and our backs. We don't do a lot of twisting movements. And so, movement does absolutely help release emotions. And it's also, great to take care of your physical body, which is a part of how we exist.
So the next one is yellow, I believe, is it?
You are correct. The next one is yellow, and that's the solar plexus chakra. And it sits slightly above your belly button, kind of that space where your ribs come up and there's a little opening there, like right where
Like
your
the
diaphragm is.
breastbone kind of
Yep, just under that breastbone, that xiphoid process, right under there. That's about where your solar plexus is. And it's going to be connected to your adrenal glands, which is your little tiny glands that secrete stress hormones like cortisol. It's going to be connected to your intestines, your stomach, your gut. So stress is a major blocker or imbalancer, is that a word, of the solar plexus chakra, because we are constantly in a state of chronic stress right now. Our bodies are, our nervous systems are constantly in fight or flight mode, constantly on the go, because there's so much coming at us all the time that we don't really get a chance to process through our stress, right? There's the very common visual of like a rabbit that gets chased by a cat. And then once the rabbit's out of danger, it shakes it off and its nervous system returns to normal. Well, as humans, right now, we're constantly being chased by that cat. That cat is work. And then that cat is home responsibilities. And then that cat is, I can't sleep because I'm so stressed out. And then you wake up in the morning and it's time to do it all over again. And that's, your kids need to get to school, and then there's work calling, and then there's an email, and the news is coming at you from all directions. And it's this constant pumping of the stress hormones into your body. And that is throwing, I think, almost everybody's solar plexus chakra out of whack. We overschedule ourselves. We don't rest. We don't give ourselves a chance to pull back into that rest and digest sort of state of being. We consider so much of our value to be based on what we can produce, what can we put into the world. And that goes back to the root chakra, right? Like, you got to, at the end of the day, you got to produce a list of the things that you accomplished. Well, I did this and this and this. I was productive, right? I did something for the world, right? Nobody's ever like, hey, you know what? I was super productive today. I took 2 naps and then I read a book that I really enjoyed, right? So the healing for the solar plexus, I think, is pulling back from that constant go, 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 from that constant pushing outward of energy. And it's manifesting itself with a lot of stomach problems, leaky gut, metabolic syndrome, just indigestion, irritable bowel syndrome, having a stomach ache, just constantly feeling nervous, right? These are solar plexus issues. And the solar plexus is the seat of action. And so it's not surprising that we're doing things. But specifically, it is the right to act toward your highest good, toward your highest self. And your highest self doesn't need to constantly be doing. In fact, it probably doesn't want to constantly be doing, because it's a very outward facing chakra and it doesn't allow for any sort of internal reflection. And if we're not looking inside, we're not learning who we are. And so you may have an overstimulated solar plexus chakra. And it's fascinating because it can be overstimulated, but you can also suffer from a lack of confidence, right? And that's all sort of tied up in the solar plexus chakra.
Right. So is it green is the next one, is it?
Green is the next one, and that is the heart chakra. So I think it won't surprise anybody that the heart is responsible for your heart organ. It's also responsible for your lungs and breathing. This is another place where breath work is really, really lovely. Shoulders and arms. And the fundamental right there is to love and to be loved. And I think there's a lot of people out there getting that first half of that right. They're nailing the loving people. They're nailing giving away their loving energy and not doing such a great job at receiving the loving energy from the universe, from other people. There's a lot of people that exist thinking they're not worthy of being loved, or that they need to change something about themselves before they could be worthy of being loved. And that's real. And self-love, taking care of themselves and fully accepting all the parts of them. And that is all sort of wrapped up into the heart chakra, where we don't have compassion and love for ourselves in the same way that we do for our children, our partners, our even strangers on the street. Sometimes we feel more loving and compassionate towards than we do ourselves. It's interesting how we manage to other ourselves. All of those people out there are worthy, 100% worthy without changing. Not me though. Somehow I'm exempt from that universal condition of being worthy of love. And I think that's just part of living in the world. It's more useful to your job, your company, to others, to the people that you interact with. It's more useful to them if you give and give and give of yourself, but make no demands. But there are people out there making a lot of demands as well who are not giving back. And that's another heart chakra imbalance. Everybody deserves to both give and take. If you're giving a lot, it's good to learn to take. If you're taking a lot, learn to give. Giving can be tough too. Giving is very vulnerable. And I'm not saying people are being selfish when they don't give. A lot of times people are afraid to give love because what if it's rejected? And that's very difficult. And so learning to love other people, learning to love yourself is a major component of the heart chakra and trying to find balance there. The other interesting thing about the heart chakra is it sits right between the 3 upper chakras and the 3 lower chakras. And so it's like acts as a fulcrum between your more ethereal spiritual chakras and your more worldly, grounded, earthly chakras. Finding balance between the two. People can get very caught on one side or the other, and that's a heart block. It also functions as a space to exchange energy with the world, right? It helps balance your internal and your external world. The heart chakra is extremely important. I don't think anybody would be surprised by that, right? The heart is a very important organ. If it stops, we stop. And if your heart chakra stops, same thing, right? Your physical heart stops, your physical body stops, your energetic heart stops, your energetic flow stops as well. And I think we're all we could use a little bit more, right? I'm the first person to say this too. The world could use a little more love. Did I just make that up? I'm teasing. I think that has been something that's been in the world since the beginning of time.
No, but what you've just said is beautiful, and I mean, I think we all know people that, they give out too much and then there's people using them and there's others that's the opposite and trying to find a balance. Yeah, it's perfect.
It's a challenge. All of this is a challenge and nobody's perfect at it. And it's not a checklist, right? You can't just be like, great, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, balanced chakras. All right, what's next, right? And it changes daily. So the idea is to have openness and space so that energy can flow to the place that it's needed at the proper time, right? There are times when we need to act, when we need to really do a lot of things. Great. Make sure your solar plexus chakra is open for that. There are times when you need to sit back and receive care and receive love. Great. Make sure your heart chakra is open. You need to take care of your body, root chakra. Great. So we're constantly looking for the balance. And that's what it means when chakras are open, that they're able to let energy in and out of them as needed for your natural state, for the circumstances you find yourself in. So the next one up is the throat. And I will say that the colors start to get a little bit tricky here. There are different schools of thought, so I'll talk a little bit about them. I always say it doesn't necessarily matter which one you choose, which one resonates with you the most, that provides you the most healing. That's the one that is right for you. So the throat chakra generally is blue, a lot of times sky blue, but you can also hear just a standard straight blue color. And it is obviously for the throat. It's also for your mouth and ears, as far as your physical structures are concerned. Communication, speech, self-expression. That's a big one. That's the right to be heard, the right to speak and to be heard. And that's a big one, is you have all these emotions sitting around in your sacral chakra, right? We talked about that earlier. But what are you going to do with them? Sometimes you need to speak them into the world, yet we find ourselves blocked here and we don't say what we're feeling. We keep our ideas and our thoughts and our creativity to ourselves. And that's a big block. Now, you and I are podcasters. We don't have that trouble. We love to take what we're thinking and put it out in the world. Actually, that's not true. Before I started my podcast, I had to do a lot of throat chakra work because I was afraid. I was wanting to start my podcast for a year before I actually did anything about it because I was so uncomfortable with the idea of putting myself and my creativity out into the world for public consumption, right? The fear of the rejection was real. And so, hey, even chakra coaches struggle with chakra imbalances. So that's a big part of the throat chakra. And I see a lot of blocks there for a lot of people in the world. We get along to go along. So you have a thought that goes against the group. No, sometimes we just don't say it just to keep the peace. And that's okay as long as you're doing it intentionally. But if it is your reaction, just sort of your knee-jerk reactions to constantly push your own thoughts down so that others can have space, that may be a block there. And it might be something that you want to look at. If you keep things bottled up, again, they will show themselves somehow. How many people, well, this might actually be you or somebody that you know, but how many people keep things tightly bottled up and for so long, and then all of a sudden, they explode into the world with anger and frustration and big emotions. And it's because the block has so much pressure behind it. I mean, it's a visualization that eventually it pushes through and you don't have, you can't stop it, right? It's a gushing of energy right out of your mouth. And that's when we run into times where we say things that we regret, right? That you wish you hadn't said, that maybe have a kernel of truth, but certainly weren't said with any support from the heart chakra. They weren't said with any love, right? And we wish we hadn't said them, but now they're out there in the world. And it's because we didn't take care of our throat chakras, sort of along the way. And then it comes out whether we want it to or not, or in a way that's helpful or truthful or not. And that's a tricky one. The flip side of the throat chakra that people don't talk about a lot, I'm discovering, is as much as it is our right to speak and to express ourselves. Remember I said ears are part of it? That's also our chakra of listening, our chakra of understanding, and receiving information from other people, right? And with a well-balanced throat chakra, we're able to do that in a respectful, calm way, which I think is somewhat lacking in parts of the world today. Our dialogue is less than civil at times. There's shouting and there's just constantly, I'm going to put my energy over the top of yours without any sort of receiving of the energy. And you don't have to agree. You can listen and not agree, but you can listen without thinking of the next thing that you're going to say or without thinking of a defense for yourself, right? Learning to listen to others is such an important skill. And it's connected with being able to express yourself. Both are important things to learn to do in the world for balance and simply existing in harmony.
And like with what you've just said, I think a lot of people have experienced, suppressing their feelings, not saying something and then exploding, seeing white and but when you kind of get in control of your emotions, and even if somebody is attacking you or whatever, once you're in control, they eventually kind of sizzle out because they've realized you're not reacting to them, because the majority of people, whether it's road rage or whatever, they just start shouting at each other. But when you keep calm, it's like their fuse just runs out and you end up winning.
That's right. That's right. And you don't have to take on their angry energy, right? And the breath travels through the throat, right? It goes from your mouth or your nose to your lungs. It travels through the throat and it can just purify. One of the translations of the Sanskrit word for throat chakra is Vishuddha, and it means purify. And you can use your breath to purify and clean that energy, both on the way in and on the way out, right? As you're receiving the energy, finding that, we talk about living in the pauses of meditation. Meditation gives us the skill of finding the space between the stimuli and the reaction, the response. And that's the throat chakra, right? You're breathing in. Oh, I hear you. I don't agree with you, and I'm not going to respond in any way that continues to fuel this fire, right? That's a beautiful example, the road rage. If you don't react to it, it's real hard for people to find that kind of, to fuel that fire long-term is really, really challenging, right? So if you don't give it more fuel, it does eventually kind of just disappear on its own. So yeah. Then we move up to the third eye chakra, which is that space sort of right between your eyebrows and slightly up, right where a third eye would be. And it's connected to the pineal gland right there in your brain. And the color is either indigo, kind of a deep purple blue, or violet. It doesn't particularly matter what helps you. This is our seat of seeing, which of course it's the third eye, makes perfect sense. Your right to see. The trick here is you have a right to see reality as it is, reality as you would like it to be. It's a double thing. So we need to be able to see reality, not constantly live in fantasies. And what I mean by this is, and tell me if this is just me, but have you ever looked back at a conversation that you had and replayed it over and over and over again in your head and thought, oh, I should have said this. Oh, I should have said this. Oh, I wish I could have done this. Or thought ahead and oh, I'm going to imagine this conversation where I'm really going to tell my coworker what's what. And you have all these great ideas and you're not really living in the present moment. You're sort of living in this imagined fantasy reality. And you're not going to change the past, right? Can't argue with the past. It'll win every time. And the future, maybe you're never actually going to have that conversation. And perhaps imagining it helps sort of you work through some emotions that you have around it. But it's when you're constantly living in the future, anxiety is a big thing about the third eye, where we're looking at a future that may or may not ever happen and living as if the worst is going to happen in that spiral thinking. People with third eye imbalances get a lot of headaches. There's just so much tension around their eyes and in the muscles that live on their skull. Everything is tight and tense, and lots of headaches because it's right there in your brain, right? Your third eye.
And it's just with the I've heard that fluoride calcifies over that. And what I've seen recently is that with the wisdom teeth, we're told take them out, they're bad. But apparently you shouldn't be taking them out because they're showing you the x-rays, they're sideways, they straighten up and apparently open up that area. Not sure if it's true or what, but I mean, I'm seeing a lot of different things. Is there ways of actually opening up the third eye for people?
Absolutely. Obviously, meditation is, for me, it's the number one, right? Meditation helps calm your mind. It helps you find that space. It helps you be less reactive. Meditation also is a great tool for living in the moment, finding the present moment. And that is a third eye balancing technique, is being here in this moment, seeing what's happening, feeling what's happening, being aware of the reality that you are living in. Now, there are a lot of good reasons to work individually and collectively to change the reality that we all share, right? There's certainly things about it that we would like to not be in it. But if we all don't have healthy third eye chakras, it's going to be really difficult for us to imagine that reality and then take action in our current reality. So mindfulness, being in the present moment, is a third eye balancing exercise. Imagination is also a great tool here. And imagination, not fantasizing or anxiety, but really just imagining, creating a solid picture, vision, like being a visionary is great for balancing the third eye chakra. As long as you come back and don't get too caught up just in your head and remember about your body. I see a lot of people who are very third eye dominant, and I have to be mindful of this myself. I have a ton of ideas and I think about all these amazing things. And then I never pull that energy down into my body to actually create them in the physical world. Everything stays very ethereal with me. And so remembering to pull your energy back down into your body, into your throat, even, right? Like pulling the vision down into your throat and then speaking about it or writing about it or journaling. Anything like that will help sort of clear up the third eye chakra as well.
And in the schooling system, because like when a child is daydreaming, tends to be when they're bored with what's going on in the classroom because they're trying to just push memory down. Like the reality is it should be encouraged and then to act on it like you've just said.
Yeah, daydreaming is super important for everyone, not just kids. Kids are just better at it than we are. they just have more skill and more practice, and they are less likely to say like, oh, well, I got to quit daydreaming and go answer my emails or throw a load of laundry in, right? Like that's just not how kids think. And we could probably learn a lot from that. But yeah, I mean, school is not really designed to encourage people to think creatively. That's not its particular intent. Which is somewhat unfortunate. You might get creative writing, but even that, you got to be creative within certain kinds of confines. And that it does get stifled fairly early in life. Yeah. School's job is not to create big thinkers. School's job is to create enough of the same kind of worker people that the world
make you compliant.
That's right. It's that the world can continue to function in the way that it has always functioned, and people in power wanted to continue to function because that helps them stay in power. It's beneficial to those with power to not have people have ideas. So yeah, and then there are always people that poke through, right? That you can't be stopped. And so maybe it's our job. I don't work in the school system, and I think that the people working like teachers in the front lines of the school system have an extremely difficult job. I really admire them. I certainly couldn't do it, wouldn't have the patience or the skills to do it. But they are confined by, I think, restrictions that don't come from them. And so if we were to do some sort of collectively imagined overhaul of our education system, daydreaming time would be amazing, right? That would be lovely, right? We'd have recess, we'd have daydreaming time, we'd maybe have nap time. There'd be different ways to encourage the development of the whole person. But the system that we have now, at least in most of the Western world, was designed sort of like Industrial Revolution style, where we weren't really looking to have creativity in the world. We were just looking to create sort of workers.
Absolutely.
So the final one is the crown chakra, and that sits right at the crown of your head, which of course makes sense. This is in just about any system of the chakras. This is the final chakra that connects to the body. Any of the additional chakras are usually floating above the body in the various astral body, emotional body, mental body, etc. But this one is sort of like a portal, if you will, between your body and the universe. This is your connection to the cosmos, to the universe, to God, to Goddess, whatever it is that you consider to be higher than yourself, broader than yourself. It could simply be your connection to your highest self or to your authentic self. But this is where that connection takes place. The color is white or violet. Again, just depends. And the fundamental right here is to know. And that's not to know everything. That's actually one of the biggest blocks that people have in the crown chakra, is believing that they know everything or that they know the right way, that they hold very tightly to their beliefs. And that actually, for a chakra related to beliefs, holding tightly to your beliefs will sure close that chakra off faster than just about anything, right? I always say, like, have strong beliefs, have strong opinions, and hold them very lightly, right? Be aware that there is so much in the universe that we don't know, And being open to new ideas and new thoughts can be beautiful. It's very challenging. Like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a household that would never have learned about chakras. And so, because I was taught to hold on to those beliefs at all costs, when I had to pry my crown chakra open to help let go of those beliefs and make space for new ideas, very, very painful and distressing, right? You feel like you're losing part of your identity if you hold on to beliefs too tightly. If you are at some point forced to let them go, it can feel shattering. It can feel awful. And so I encourage people, have your beliefs, believe them strongly, but lightly. So
I think that's actually very important, especially in the last few years, because there's a lot of craziness going on, and there's a lot of turmoil in the house because of one person's belief system and the other. And I mean, I just know over the years, especially with the podcasting, is with the different guests getting on and just learning something. And I mean, just because somebody says something doesn't mean that, oh, I believe that, but then I'll do further research, and I have no problem changing it. It's like, oh, my thought process was that this is correct, but now I know it's not, and it's no problem to me. But I think it's the ego gets in the way of a lot of people. Even though you can give them all the evidence of something, they'll still stick to their belief system because the ego is in the way.
yes, psychology actually has done studies after studies showing that the more facts you present people that are contrary to the beliefs, the harder they hold on to those beliefs, which is such an interesting human response. But it is ego, because if you identify with your belief system, to then change your belief system means that something was fundamentally wrong with you. And I would like to posit that that's not the case. You are not your beliefs. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are you. And you have thoughts and you have beliefs and you have emotions, and that's all fine and normal and natural, and you should. But it's when you believe those thoughts to be a core part of who you are that it really breaks people. And so they, rather than be wrong, they'll just hold on to wrong thoughts. And I get it. I get it. That hurts. No beliefs. Not only could you lose you, what if you lost your family or your community? Like, what if that put you out and ostracized you from everyone that you know and love? Like, who would voluntarily do that? That hurts. That's terrible. And it's scary. And historically, isolation and being ostracized like that meant certain death. We wouldn't like, that's a terrible idea. So we hold on to those beliefs. And so I think hopefully listeners to your podcast and my podcasts are learning that we are not necessarily identified with those thoughts and beliefs, that we can let them go. And that's part of the crown chakra, is learning to detach and understanding that the universe, your God, your divine, has a how for you, and maybe even a what for you that you don't know about, and to be open to that. And when I think of the fundamental right of the crown chakra to know, I think that's what we know. We know that we are a part of something larger. We know we have the right to know that we're not alone. We have the right to know that we are not separate. And I think for a long time, some organized religions have taken that right away from people. They're like, you must go through me, a middleman, before you can reach divine. And what I love about the chakra system is that it, at its core, is a way to bring the divine directly into you through these chakras. And in the very ancient tradition, each chakra was a place for a different deity, a different divine, and with all of its qualities to enter you. With the Western thought, we tend to think of that more as just a crown chakra function, but you can know the divine personally without a middleman. And I think that is one of the most beautiful and life-altering things that I learned as a student of the chakras.
Right. Love it. And like, just kind of finally, with when, like for me, I mean, I've done the movement, doing the exercise, and I make sure I eat as organic as possible. I try to eat as healthy. And I know when I'm in alignment, I know just by the way I'm walking and everything. And fast, I can pick up on something and I can get it fixed. And I think that's just the secret, is to just be in tune with everything you're doing. There's no kind of way. I mean, there's people that can do energy healing and they can, free up air where there's blockages and stuff. But the reality is just to be in tune with yourself.
I agree. Yeah, I think, I help facilitate a lot of that work for people through coaching and energy healing, etc. But my goal, my purpose really is to help people learn to do that for themselves, give people the tools that they need to find alignment on their own, right? We all are fundamentally capable of it. We have the ability, we have the right to be aligned, to be whole, to be healthy, to feel in line with our authentic self. And we lose a little bit of that. So it's nice to have guidance, and it's nice to have a teacher. But in the end, you can do it yourself. It's lovely to have community. I think it's super helpful. But yeah, when you can get in touch with yourself, that's the key.
Sarah, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I love the way you've explained everything and the stories that you've put with it. You might let people know how they can get in contact with you.
Sure. I think probably the easiest way is through the podcast itself. The podcast is called Your Chakra Coach. And you can, if you're interested, if you are brand new to the chakras, there are a lot of episodes that go into deep exploration of each one. There are also broader episodes if you're interested in the chakras stress response or how to manifest with the chakras. There's a lot of different available information. And you can find me on Instagram and Facebook, Your Chakra Coach. So if you have a specific question you want to reach out to me about, you can do that there. And then, of course, I have a website where you can learn more about me and my work broadly, and that is yourchakracoach.com. Essentially, that's Your Chakra Coach everywhere on the internets.
Well, it just shows that you were early to the game, that you've actually secured that, because that's a brilliant domain to have.
Thanks.
So that's brilliant. Listen, I'll make sure I'll put the links both on the audio and the video. So thank you very much, Sarah.
My pleasure.
So that's all for the Meditation Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on meditationpodcast.org. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube. My 4 other podcasts, Learn Polish Podcast, the Crypto Podcast, Speaking Podcast, and The Awakening. And my coaching you'll find on bio.link/podcaster. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends, and make sure you give Sarah a 5-star rating as well, because it really helps. Until next week, take care.